So which scientists do you believe? The Shroud of Turin, which supposedly was the covering on Jesus's corpse right after the crucifixion. 2 decades ago, they ran tests on it, and the tests showed that this object had to be from the 13th century because of the fabric. But they took tiny little cuts out of it to do this.
It wasn't the original.
Now, they're working on it again with up-to-date scientific equipment has shown that no, the fabric from this other part of the shroud from which they took the sample.
Of the hundreds or thousands of shrouds like this that exist, why do we think this one has an image of Jesus on it?
All of it matches the way in which Jesus was crucified. For example, on the shroud, we have blood all over it. It's type AB blood, which is Semitic blood. Only 6% of the world's population has type AB blood. And so this is human blood. It's male blood. It's not blood of an animal. You would have to actually kill someone if you were trying to reproduce the shroud, because we have pre-mortem and post-mortem blood all over the shroud.
And when they tried to recreate it, they found the only way you can do that is with short bursts of extreme ultraviolet light radiation. And Dr. Paolo Lazzaro said that the light necessary, the power of the light necessary, exceeds the maximum power released by all ultraviolet light sources available today. And get this, he said that you would need pulses having durations shorter than 1/40 billionth of a second and intensities on the order of several billion watts. This thing was intense light radiation.
When genetic researchers at the University of Padua finally decoded the most disturbing DNA sequence ever extracted from the Shroud of Turin, the Vatican ordered a complete media blackout within 6 hours because buried in the genetic data was something that should not exist: DNA from a marine creature that lives 3,000 miles away in the Pacific Ocean at depths where sunlight never reaches. And here is the kicker. The organism's genetic code shows radiation damage patterns identical to what you see in animals exposed to nuclear blasts, except this DNA is 2,000 years old, which means something happened on or near this cloth that released enough energy to mutate deep-sea creature DNA, while somehow burning an image into linen that modern laser technology still cannot replicate.
There's pollen, but there's also a specific limestone signature from the soil of Jerusalem that's on the shroud. And guess where it's at? I'm going to try not to choke up at this part. This is so moving to me because we know Jesus carries the cross.
Yeah.
We know this is the back right here of the man of the shroud.
Yeah.
There are additional abrasions on the shoulder.
Here is what we can verify as fact. The Shroud of Turin is a 14-foot-long linen cloth bearing the image of a crucified man. It sits in a climate-controlled case in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy. The image shows a male body approximately 5 feet 11 inches tall, with wounds matching Roman crucifixion. In 1988, 3 independent laboratories carbon-dated the cloth to between 1260 and 1390 AD, suggesting medieval origin. But in 2015, Dr. Gianni Barcaccia at the University of Padua published DNA analysis in Scientific Reports that found genetic material from 19 different plant species, human DNA from 7 different ethnic populations, and one sequence that made every scientist on the project demand the test be run 3 more times.
Of the man who had the Sudarium wrapped around him. So it matches like that. It's also type AB, which is also the type on the shroud. It's also post-mortem blood.
Right.
And type AB is the rarest blood type. It's about 3 times more common in Mediterranean Jews than it is in Europeans.
The Eucharistic miracles,
Same.
The type is always AB.
AB, pretty amazing.
I mean, just recently they verified the Shroud of Turin. Have you seen that?
They used to think that it was only a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
And now they've changed that.
Yeah, they said no, it is back then.
They also don't understand how it was made, which to me is very fascinating because it's not paint. They don't know what caused the image itself and how that technology would have even been available.
It wasn't, no.
A couple thousand years ago.
An intense light, atomic, to leave almost like a photographic imprint on a piece of cloth.
Yeah.
Urged, beaten. The hairstyle was from the 1st century. And the pollens that they found in the cloth were from that region.
Yeah.
Also, the weave was a 1st century weave. And another guy, an archaeologist who I knew, told me that if you look close, you can see that the image of a Tiberius coin marks on the eyes. Now, I don't know if that's real or not. I've never actually checked that, but that there's images of Tiberius on the coin.
So they would put the coins over the eyes?
The sequence matched a marine annelid worm from the family Ceboglynidae. These creatures live exclusively in hydrothermal vent systems in the northern Pacific Ocean, off the coast of Canada, at depths between 300 and 800 meters. They have never been documented in the Mediterranean Sea. They did not exist anywhere near Europe in medieval times, and the species was not even formally classified by science until 2009. Yet somehow its DNA is embedded deep in the weave of a cloth that supposedly never left the Middle East and Europe. But here is where things get absolutely insane. When Dr. Sarah Mendez, a marine biologist at Oregon State University, analyzed the worm DNA sequence in December 2025, she found mutation patterns that stopped her cold. The genetic code showed damage consistent with exposure to ionizing radiation, the same type of cellular destruction you see in organisms near Chernobyl or Fukushima. One geneticist who reviewed her findings told colleagues in a leaked email, "This DNA was damaged by an energy event that released at least 10,000 rads of radiation in under 1 second. That is enough to kill every living thing within 50 meters instantly."
How is the image of a man's face left in the Shroud of Turin?
This is fascinating because the image is actually over top of the blood stains, and it's on the fibrils of the linen, only at the very tips of the linen. And so they did tests on this. The image's penetration only goes into the fabric 0.7 micrometers. You can't fake that. It's not brush strokes, it's not soaked in, it's not charred, and that's 0.000028 inches into it.
Now here is something that will blow your mind. Dr. Barcaccia's team extracted DNA from 93 different dust samples collected by vacuuming the shroud in 1977 and 1988. They found human 88. They found human mitochondrial DNA from multiple ethnic groups, Western European haplogroups common in medieval France and Italy, Middle Eastern sequences typical of ancient Judea and Syria, North African markers from Egyptian and Berber populations, and Indian subcontinent DNA from the Arabian Peninsula and Gujarat region. When you map these genetic origins on a timeline, they trace the exact path that Shroud believers claim the cloth traveled from 1st century Jerusalem through Turkey, Greece, Eastern Europe, France, and finally to Turin in 1578. But here is the deal. If this shroud is a medieval fake created in France around 1300 AD, how does it contain authentic Middle Eastern DNA from multiple individuals? How does it have plant DNA from species not introduced to Europe until after Columbus discovered America in 1492? And most disturbing of all, how does it have Pacific Ocean marine worm DNA showing 2,000-year-old degradation? Some researchers believe the carbon dating was contaminated by a fire that damaged the shroud in 1532. Others think the cloth traveled to places not mentioned in any historical record. A few scientists working on the DNA data have privately admitted the evidence suggests an event that current physics cannot explain.
Can you imagine being flogged and scourged? You're dehydrated, you have high levels of ferritin, you're experiencing organ failure, your creatinine's off, your kidneys are shutting down, you're dehydrated. Then you're asked to carry the cross at least a half mile to Golgotha. It weighs 125 pounds. Jesus only weighs maybe 170 pounds and less after the loss of bodily fluids. He falls to the ground, Michael. And the tradition is that Simon of Cyrene is tasked by the Romans to carry it. Accordingly, the man of the shroud, there is soil in the feet, but there's soil all over the knees and then in the tip of the nose. When Jesus falls, carrying the cross for us, he falls face down into the ground. And there's even soil samples at the tip of the nose where he fell.
Hit subscribe right now because what happened next makes this mystery absolutely explosive. In February 2026, a forensic team reanalyzed the blood samples on the shroud using advanced DNA extraction. They confirmed the blood type is AB positive, found in only 7% of the global population, but appearing in 16% of Middle Eastern populations. The blood DNA came from a single male individual with genetic markers consistent with ancient Jewish ancestry. But here is what made the lead researcher demand an emergency meeting with Vatican officials. The marine worm DNA was not just on the cloth surface, it was mixed directly into the blood samples at the molecular level. Here is what makes this absolutely impossible to explain. Dr. Mendez ran isotope analysis on the worm DNA in late January 2026. The genetic material shows carbon-14 decay patterns consistent with the organism dying approximately 2,000 years ago. Not medieval contamination, not modern pollution, but ancient organic matter that was alive during the exact time period when the shroud supposedly wrapped a body in Jerusalem. And here is the kicker. When she compared the degradation rate to the human blood, DNA, in the same samples, both died at approximately the same time, within a margin of error of plus or minus 50 years.
We have pre-mortem and post-mortem blood all over the shroud. So this tells us that someone died a torturous death. What we have is the front on the left. In the middle of the camera, we see the face of the crucified man. You can actually see between rib 5 and 6 a gash in the side. Well, Jesus, we know, is penetrated through rib 5 and 6 by a spear. John says blood and water comes out. Well, that's post-mortem blood. All of this bears correspondence with what we read in the Gospels about how Jesus died.
Now let me tell you something that changes everything. The shroud image itself has properties that no medieval forger could create. The image penetrates only the top few microfibers of each linen thread to a depth of less than 1/500th of an inch. It is not paint, not dye, not pigment. It is a scorch mark created by some form of directed energy that oxidized the cellulose in the linen. In 2012, Italian researchers at ENEA used ultraviolet excimer lasers, the most powerful laser technology available, to try replicating the image. They could not produce the same microscopic detail and shallow penetration, even with equipment that consumes the entire power output of a city block. But here is where the radiation evidence becomes critical. Dr. Mendez's team discovered that the marine worm DNA damage patterns match exactly what happens during flash radiation exposure. Genetic material breaks down in a very specific sequence when hit with intense ionizing radiation. First, the mitochondrial DNA fragments, then nuclear DNA degrades. Finally, protein structures collapse. The worm DNA shows this exact pattern, and here is what makes scientists uncomfortable. The damage signature indicates exposure to temperatures exceeding 600 degrees Celsius for less than 0.3 seconds. A burst of heat so intense and so brief that it killed the organism and mutated its DNA without igniting the surrounding linen fabric. What most people do not understand is what this means. If radiation created the shroud image, the same energy burst could explain the impossible DNA. Some researchers studying high-energy physics have suggested that certain types of directed radiation can cause molecular-level contamination. Genetic material from organisms in the surrounding environment can become embedded in materials during intense energy events. But here is the problem with that theory. You would need an energy source equivalent to a controlled nuclear reaction or particle accelerator beam, and neither of those technologies existed in the 1st century, the 14th century, or any time before 1945.
Is 1st century, and more than that the blood stains on this are human blood, and more than that, there's an element or a substance in the blood that only appears in the blood when someone has undergone major physical trauma.
Here is evidence that supports something even stranger. When the research team analyzed plant DNA found on the shroud, they identified species from drastically different climates and continents: Mediterranean oak, Middle Eastern acacia, Chinese spruce, and even plants from the Americas, including members of the nightshade family that were not brought to Europe until 1500 AD. But here is what nobody can explain. Many of these plant DNA samples show the same radiation damage patterns as the marine worm, degraded in the exact same way, at the exact same time, suggesting they were all present during a single massive energy release event. Now here is something that will completely change how you see this mystery. In late January 2026, a team at MIT ran spectroscopic analysis on fiber samples from the shroud. they found microscopic particles of iron oxide and calcium carbonate embedded in the bloodstains, the exact chemical composition you would expect from ancient Jerusalem limestone quarries mixed with blood. The particles show fusion patterns consistent with exposure to temperatures above 800 degrees Celsius. But here is the kicker. The fusion occurred in microseconds, not the slow heating of a fire, a flash of intense heat that melted mineral particles while leaving the surrounding blood proteins intact. But here is where everything connects in the most disturbing way possible. Dr. Barkaccia's team found one more piece of DNA that nobody talks about. Sequences from multiple bird species, including migratory birds common to the Middle East, and genetic material from organisms found exclusively in the Dead Sea region. When combined with the human DNA showing ancient Jewish markers, the Middle Eastern plant species, the Jerusalem limestone particles, and the radiation-damaged marine worm DNA, the evidence suggests this cloth was in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. Something bled onto it, and something released enough energy to burn an image into linen, mutate DNA, and fuse minerals at the molecular level.
Pretty amazing. So the idea is that the Sudarium was affixed to the back of the head here, and if you look really close, you can see these holes where pins were put through to the hair. There is a ponytail-shaped funnel right here of his hair, and this is where it would have affixed to, and this butterfly shape fits right onto the ponytail.
What recent analysis revealed in early February 2026 is even more explosive. Forensic specialists compared the human male blood DNA to genetic databases containing thousands of ancient Middle Eastern samples. The blood DNA shows markers extremely rare in modern populations, but documented in ancient Jewish communities from the Galilee region, specifically genetic variations found in fewer than 0.3% of current Middle Eastern populations. Some geneticists who reviewed the data told colleagues this DNA profile is consistent with ancient Levantine populations that have not existed in this genetic form for nearly 2,000 years. Here is what makes the Vatican's reaction so significant. When Dr. Barkaccia first published the DNA study in 2015, church officials called the findings interesting, but inconclusive. When the Pacific worm sequences were identified, they dismissed it as obvious contamination. When the radiation damage patterns became known in late 2025, Vatican scientific advisors requested all research papers be submitted for review before publication. But in January 2026, when the blood DNA analysis and the 2,000-year-old degradation timeline became public through leaked emails, the Vatican stopped all official comments. Pope Leo XIV, who had announced plans to visit the Shroud in Turin, canceled the trip with no explanation. Cardinal Robert Ripoll, who oversees the Shroud, was told by Vatican officials to decline all media requests. But here is the kicker that nobody can ignore. 3 separate research teams have now confirmed the same impossible findings: Pacific Ocean marine worm DNA, 2,000-year-old degradation patterns, radiation damage signatures, Middle Eastern human male blood (NA), Jerusalem limestone particles, and an image created by energy technology that should not exist. Some scientists believe this proves the Shroud is an elaborate hoax that acquired impossible contamination through some mechanism we do not understand. Others think it suggests the cloth experienced events and traveled to places completely missing from historical records. A few researchers working directly with the genetic data have privately stated that the evidence points to a single catastrophic energy event in 1st century Jerusalem that current physics cannot explain with any known natural process. Here is what we know for certain. In February 2026, the Shroud of Turin contains genetic material from organisms that should not be there, degraded by radiation that should not have existed, showing timeline patterns that contradict medieval origin, mixed with blood from an ancient Middle Eastern male whose genetic profile matches populations that disappeared 2,000 years ago, and nobody in the scientific community can provide a complete explanation that accounts for all the evidence. The Vatican refuses to authorize new testing. The Italian government will not allow destructive sampling. and the DNA data that already exists is so contradictory that researchers cannot agree on basic interpretations.
And this butterfly shape fits right onto the ponytail. And then you can see these blood, little pinpoints of blood wounds match this exactly. And then it would wrap around the front, so it gets around to the front and makes contact with the face, but it's not wrapped all the way around the head because the face, scientists have figured out, is lulled forward and to the right like this. So they can't get it all the way around when he's on the cross. So they double it back, and that's what creates that stain.
The question is not whether strange DNA exists on the Shroud of Turin. 3 independent laboratories have now confirmed it does. The question is not whether radiation damaged that DNA. The mutation patterns prove it happened. The real question that nobody wants to answer is what kind of event could simultaneously kill a Pacific deep-sea worm, mutate its DNA through intense radiation, embed that genetic material into blood and linen at the molecular level, create an image that modern technology cannot replicate, and do all of this 2,000 years ago in a place where none of it should be scientifically possible. Some mysteries have answers. Some mysteries force science to admit the limits of current understanding. And some mysteries suggest that something occurred in 1st century Jerusalem that left genetic evidence we are only now capable of detecting, but completely incapable of explaining.